The Magnavox Odyssey. Released in 1972, the Magnavox Odyssey was the very first home console, and also the most confusing. It had no sound, no color, and used transparent plastic overlays you slapped on your TV. There were no actual graphics, just glowing dots. The games on it were pretty boring. Tennis, hockey, Simon Says, which were all just different ways to move dots around. But hey, it walked so every other console could run. The Atari. The Atari 2600 dropped in 1977 and brought arcade classics into living rooms for the first time. It had wood paneling and a joystick with one button. It gave us Space Invaders and Pitfall, and basically invented home gaming. If you've ever played an Atari, you're definitely old. The Nintendo Entertainment System. Released in 1983 in Japan and later worldwide, the NES basically resurrected gaming after the 1983 video game crash. It introduced us to games like Mario and Zelda, and a whole generation of pixelated icons that are still huge today. The controller? A simple rectangle that somehow managed to hurt your hands and feel perfect at the same time. I'm sure a lot of you remember blowing in the cartridges when they stopped working. This thing made Nintendo a household name and changed gaming forever. The Sega Master System. This thing was Sega's response to Nintendo's NES. The Master System came out in 1985 and had way better specs, but got way less popularity. It had some pretty solid games like Alex Kidd and Phantasy Star, but none of them could outjump Mario. The console itself looked super slick, sharp angles, red labels, and a futuristic vibe like it came from an 80s sci-fi movie. Fun fact, it did really well in Brazil, where people still play it today. No joke. The SEGA Genesis. Sega's 16-bit upgrade from the Master System, the Genesis, was basically Sega yelling, "We're serious now." Released in 1988, it cranked everything up. Better graphics, better gameplay, and a blue hedgehog with way too much attitude. This is where Sega picked its first real fight with Nintendo. It had faster games, louder marketing, and blast processing, which meant absolutely nothing. Still, it gave us hits like Sonic, Streets of Rage, and NBA Jam. This is when Sega stopped being the underdog and marked the beginning of the first ever console war. The Game Boy. A green screen, 2 AA batteries, and Tetris. Released in 1989, the Game Boy didn't have the flashiest graphics, but it made one promise. You can game anywhere. Whether you were in the backseat of a car, stuck in a waiting room, or hiding it under your pillow at night, the Game Boy was there. It launched with Tetris, which is now the most played video game of all time. It was built like a tank too. One of them literally survived a bombing during the Gulf War and still works to this day. And if that wasn't enough, it also gave the world Pokemon. It's safe to say that the Game Boy is by far one of the most influential consoles of all time. And for Sega, this was a polite reminder, don't mess with Nintendo. The PlayStation. Sony's first console, the PlayStation, launched in 1994 after Nintendo ghosted them on another project. Sony took the heartbreak and said, fine, we'll make our own console. And they didn't just enter the scene, they exploded onto it. It used CDs instead of cartridges, and suddenly, games had depth. Final Fantasy VII, Resident Evil, Crash Bandicoot, all legends who were born or made iconic. It introduced memory cards, which felt like magical save crystals, and I'm sure tons of you remember that iconic startup. Sony instantly became a top player in the console wars, and this was just the beginning for them. The Nintendo 64. The N64 hit shelves in 1996 and brought 3D gaming into the mainstream. It's seen the release of classics, such as Mario 64 and GoldenEye. I'm sure many of you remember that weird Trident controller you had to grow a third hand to use. Nintendo stuck with cartridges, which meant super fast load times, but tiny storage. This console is definitely up there as one of the best. The Dreamcast. Sega's final console, the Dreamcast, dropped in 1998 and felt like it came from 5 years in the future. It was the first ever console with online multiplayer, and the controller had a little screen which doubled as a mini handheld. The Dreamcast launched with Sonic Adventure, Jet Set Radio, and Crazy Taxi. Hey! All classics. This console was way ahead of its time, but with poor marketing and Sony's looming PlayStation 2, it never stood a chance. It was critically loved but commercially doomed. This console put an end to Sega's 18-year run in the console market and is known by fans as the console that deserved better. The PlayStation 2. Released in 2000, the PlayStation 2 wasn't just a console, it was a historical moment. It's still the best-selling console of all time, with over 160 million units sold. You probably played San Andreas, Guitar Hero, Kingdom Hearts. If it lived on the PS2, it was iconic. It also doubled as a DVD player, which was a big deal back then and quietly helped with its success. The design was sleek, the library was massive, and the third-party support was unmatched. The PS2 wasn't just an upgrade from the original, it was Sony planting their flag as the king of the consoles. The Xbox. Microsoft joined the console war in 2001 with the original Xbox. It was bulky, it was loud, and came with the Duke controller, which was basically a dinner plate with buttons. This thing was a beast. It had a built-in hard drive, letting you save games without memory cards, which was mind-blowing at the time. And then came Halo. Halo didn't just sell the console, it launched a franchise, revolutionized first-person shooters, and basically invented LAN parties. Sure, it didn't outsell the PS2, but it earned respect fast and proved that Microsoft were here to stay. The Nintendo DS. When the DS launched in 2004, the whole world was intrigued by its two screens. It sounded crazy, but it clearly worked, as the DS went on to sell over 150 million units and become the second best-selling console of all time. It featured a clamshell design, a stylus, and a resistive touchscreen, years before smartphones made that mainstream. It had Mario Kart DS, Nintendogs, PictoChat, and loads of other classics. The cartridges were tiny. We'd come a long way from the chunky plastic bricks in the 80s. The DS didn't just reinvent handhelds, it changed what a portable console could be. The Xbox 360. Microsoft's second console, the Xbox 360, dropped in 2005 and basically redefined online gaming overnight. Xbox Live wasn't just a feature, it was the reason to own an Xbox. You had voice chat, friends lists, party chat, achievements, and Modern Warfare 2 lobbies that toughened an entire generation. And I'm sure many of you remember the iconic profile pictures. It gave us Halo 3, Gears of War, Red Dead Redemption, Skate, and so many other amazing games. The controller was a massive upgrade, comfortable, wireless, and set the standard for how controllers should feel. Don't think I'd forget about the Red Ring of Death. A hardware failure so iconic, it basically became a rite of passage. Microsoft had to extend warranties and replace millions of consoles. But people kept coming back. This console is my personal favorite and probably the one I've spent the most time on. The PlayStation 3. The PlayStation 3 dropped in 2006 and instantly made headlines for its ridiculous $500 price tag. To put that in perspective, that would be around $800 in today's money. People joked you'd need a second job just to afford one. But to be fair, you were getting a Blu-ray player, a powerful cell processor, and free online multiplayer, while Xbox was charging money. It launched with a bit of a stumble. Weird marketing, a limited game library, and a controller that felt like someone forgot to put batteries in it. But over time, it found its stride. Uncharted, The Last of Us, Little Big Planet, God of War 3, the exclusives were stacked. By the end of its run, the PS3 had made its way back into the fight. A comeback story powered by some of the best games of the generation. The Wii. The Wii also dropped in 2006 and instantly became the console for everyone. Kids, parents, grandparents, even your cat. It wasn't trying to compete with the PS3 or Xbox 360. Instead, Nintendo thought, what if you swung the controller like a tennis racket? The motion controls were revolutionary, and sometimes dangerous. It came bundled with Wii Sports, which basically turned every living room into a bowling alley. It had a modest design and tiny storage, but it didn't matter. The fun was the selling point. Games like Mario Galaxy, Wii Fit, Just Dance, and Mario Kart kept the momentum going. Plus, let's not forget Mii's, those little bubble-headed avatars that lived on your console and dominated Wii Sports. It wasn't the most powerful console, but it was the most inviting, and it proved that fun is more important than specs. The PlayStation 4. Released in 2013, the PlayStation 4 was the comeback kid after the PS3's rocky start. Sony kept it simple: powerful hardware, a straightforward design, and a focus on what gamers actually cared about: games. It was easier for developers to work with, and it showed. Spider-Man, God of War, Bloodborne, Uncharted 4, the list goes on. This console saw the introduction of clips and live streams, and suddenly, everyone became a content creator. The interface was sleek, and the controller got an upgrade with that light bar and touchpad. Sony also built momentum with PlayStation Plus, monthly free games, and solid indie support. The messaging was clear: this is for the players. No weird integrated TV features, no motion gimmicks, just a console that knew its job and did it really well. By the end of its run, the PS4 had sold over 117 million units, making it one of the best-selling consoles ever. The Xbox One. The Xbox One launched in 2013, just 1 week after the PlayStation 4, and it stumbled hard out of the gate. Microsoft pitched it more like a home entertainment hub than a gaming console. TV integration, voice commands, Connect 2. They also had this insane policy where the console had to connect to the internet every 24 hours, or it would literally lock you out of your games, even single-player ones. Gamers were like, okay, but where are the games? Something they definitely weren't asking Sony. But after some serious course correction, Xbox pivoted hard. The 24-hour online thing got scrapped, Connect faded into the shadows, and the Game Pass became a game changer. The hardware was solid, the controller was refined, and over time, the Xbox One turned into a quiet powerhouse. You could even talk to it, and it might actually respond. It didn't win the generation, but it laid the groundwork for what Xbox would become. A platform, not just a box. The Nintendo Switch. In 2017, Nintendo dropped the Switch, a hybrid console you could play anywhere, even on the toilet. It was a bold move, one device that worked both docked to your TV and as a handheld. Skeptics weren't sure if it would take off, but then Breath of the Wild hit, and suddenly everyone wanted one. Follow that with Mario Odyssey, Animal Crossing, and Smash Ultimate, and the Switch quickly became a cultural juggernaut. Sales skyrocketed, especially during the COVID lockdown. At one point, you couldn't find a Switch anywhere. Of course, no console is perfect. Stick drift became the Switch's curse. Players would leave their controller for 5 minutes just to find their character had wandered halfway across the map. Still, with over 150 million units sold, the Switch proved that nobody does weird and wonderful like Nintendo. The PlayStation 5. The PS5 dropped in 2020 and looked like a Wi-Fi router from the future. It's fast, powerful, and nearly silent, with load times that feel like magic compared to past consoles. The new DualSense controller brought haptic feedback and adaptive triggers, and it was also the first released console to support 120 frames per second, making games feel 10 times smoother. It launched with a strong lineup too: Demon's Souls, Miles Morales, Ratchet & Clank, and more.
The way he leaps off of rooftops and flips backwards to face the camera before falling into a headfirst dive is just full of the exaggerated swagger of a black teen.
The only problem was, you probably couldn't find one for like 2 years unless you sold a kidney to afford resale price. But once you had it, it was definitely worth it. The Xbox Series X. In 2020, shortly after the release of the PS5, Microsoft dropped the Xbox Series X, a chunky black tower of power. They also dropped the Series S, a more budget-friendly version of the Series X. Both consoles brought SSD speed, 120 frames per second support, and quick resume, which lets you bounce between games like a multitasking wizard. And then there's the Game Pass, which features bangers like Halo Infinite, Forza Horizon 5, Sea of Thieves, and more. Design-wise, it's more understated, especially when compared to the PS5, but it gives off that classic Xbox powerhouse look, which shows it means business. On paper, the Series X is slightly more powerful than the PS5, but the truth is the difference is barely noticeable. Plus, the PS5 has double the amount of sales, so I think it's clear who has won this generation. Now you're officially a console historian. Let me know in the comments any of your favorites that I missed out on. This was actually my first video, so if you made it to the end, you're a legend. I've got more content like this coming, so if you liked it, maybe subscribe and stick around. Thanks for watching.